Don't touch me, unless you're willing to change my fate. The wind howled across the boost crimson desert, carrying grains of sand that stung like needles against Ethan Cole's faceplate as he stepped down from his half-dead shuttle, boots crunching over glassed earth still warm from the twin suns above. His scanner flickering with static and one weak signal that shouldn't have been there. Not this far beyond map territory, not in a place where even machines seemed to hesitate. And yet there it was, faint, uneven, alive. He almost turned back, almost. Told himself it wasn't worth the fuel, the risk, the trouble, but something in the irregular rhythm pulled at him, something too human to ignore. So he followed it over a ridge of fractured stone until he saw her, half buried in the sand like the planet itself was trying to erase her, blue skin catching the light in soft pulses, not bright, not weak, just holding on, her wrists bound in thin, metallic bands that hummed faintly, her breath shallow but steady, and for a second Ethan just stood there, the heat pressing in, the silence louder than any warning siren. Then her eyes snapped open, sharp, focused, not afraid but furious. "Don't," she rasped, voice dry but cutting. "Don't come closer." And he froze, hands slightly raised, not because she could stop him, but because she meant it, because even broken and half-swallowed by a dying world, she still held on to something fierce and unyielding, something he recognized. "Easy," he muttered, kneeling slowly, the smell of heated minerals and something faintly metallic filling his lungs. "You're not exactly in a position to argue." Her gaze didn't waver, didn't soften, but her breathing hitched, just once, as if the effort of holding that defiance cost more than she wanted him to see. Ethan reached for the restraints anyway, fingers brushing the surface, feeling the faint vibration of alien tech. Unfamiliar, but not impossible. "If I wanted to hurt you," he added quietly, "I wouldn't be talking." The wind shifted, carrying a distant hum, low and mechanical, and something in her expression flickered. Not fear, not exactly, but urgency. "They're coming," she said, softer now, almost to herself. Then her eyes locked onto his again, sharper, more desperate. "If you help me, you don't get to walk away unchanged." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, thumb pressing against the release seam, the band loosening with a faint hiss as the first restraint fell away. "Lady," he said, voice rough with dust and something deeper. "Nothing out here leaves you unchanged." The second band followed, and as her arm shifted free, the faint glow beneath her skin pulsed stronger for just a second, like a heartbeat finding rhythm again, and for the first time, just for a fraction of a moment, the fire in her eyes dimmed into something else. Something uncertain, something that almost looked like trust, before the distant hum grew louder, closer, and the ground beneath them trembled ever so slightly, reminding Ethan exactly how little time they had left. The hum grew louder, no longer a distant echo but a steady vibration that crawled up through Ethan's boots and into his chest as the sky above shimmered with faint distortions, not visible ships, not yet, but something watching, tracking, waiting for a signal that had just been broken. And Ethan knew enough about bad situations to recognize when he had just stepped directly into one. He grabbed her arm carefully, feeling the heat radiating through her skin, not burning but wrong, like standing too close to a machine that was running beyond safe limits. "Can you walk?" he asked, already knowing the answer as her body shifted, unsteady, muscles reacting slower than they should, her jaw tightening as if refusing to admit weakness. "I can," she said. But the first step faltered, and Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, her weight lighter than he expected, her breath brushing against his collar as she steadied herself. And for a brief second her hand pressed against his chest, right over his heart, both of them freezing at the contact, her eyes flickering with something sharp and unreadable. "Your heartbeat," she whispered, almost confused, then pulled her hand back like she had touched something forbidden. The hum above them pulsed again, stronger now, and Ethan did not wait for another warning. "We move now," he said, guiding her toward the ridge where his shuttle sat half buried in sand and regret, each step kicking up clouds of fine dust that clung to everything. The air growing thicker, heavier, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Her grip on his arm tightened despite herself, not out of fear but necessity. And Ethan could feel the subtle tremor running through her. Not cold, not injury. Something deeper, something internal that his mind tried and failed to categorize. "What did they do to you?" he asked, not looking at her, eyes scanning the horizon, the sky, the broken terrain that offered no real cover. "They prepared me," she answered, voice low, controlled, but the words carried a weight that did not need explanation. "My kind. We are valuable when we enter a certain phase." She paused, breath catching slightly, and Ethan noticed the faint glow beneath her skin pulsing again, more frequent now, like a signal trying to break through. "And if we refuse," she continued, "we are not given a choice." Ethan clenched his jaw, not because he was surprised, but because he was not. He had seen enough across enough systems to know how power twisted purpose into something ugly. "Not happening," he muttered, more to himself than to her. They reached the shuttle, its hull scorched and dented but still standing, still functional if he coaxed it hard enough. He keyed the hatch open and helped her inside, the cooler air washing over them both as the door sealed with a heavy hiss, cutting off the wind but not the tension. The interior lights flickered, casting uneven shadows across her face as she leaned against the wall, breathing uneven now, eyes half closed as if focusing inward. "It is starting," she said, quieter this time, and Ethan turned, frowning. "What is starting?" he asked, but before she answered, she looked at him fully, really looked, and whatever she saw made her expression shift, not into fear, not into anger, but something far more dangerous, something fragile. "If I lose control," she said slowly, choosing each word, "they will find me again, and next time, I will not be me anymore." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside, and Ethan realized this was not just about escape, not just about survival. This was about something being taken from her that could not be returned, something he did not yet understand. And as the glow beneath her skin pulsed brighter, reflecting faintly in his eyes, he knew this moment was about to demand more from him than he had ever planned to give. The shuttle systems groaned to life with a low, uneven hum as Ethan moved across the cramped cockpit, fingers flying over worn controls, rerouting power from non-essential systems while the air inside grew warmer with each passing second. Not from the failing cooling unit, but from her. The heat radiating off Lyra, now impossible to ignore. It filled the space like an invisible pressure, subtle but relentless. And when he glanced back at her, the glow beneath her skin had intensified, soft waves of light pulsing outward in steady rhythm, matching something deeper than breath, matching something instinctive, ancient. "Sit down," he said, voice firm but controlled, gesturing toward the bench along the wall. But she did not move. Instead, she stood there gripping the edge of the console, her knuckles pale against blue skin, her breathing uneven as if every inhale required effort. "It is not something I can stop," she said, quieter now, her earlier strength thinning at the edges. "It is built into us." Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing his focus back to the instruments. Altitude stabilizer offline, navigation scrambled, external sensors flickering with interference that suggested the search above had not given up. "Not yet, then we buy time," he muttered, more to the machine than to her. He pulled a lever, the engines whining as they shifted into a low power idle, enough to mask their signature for now. Hopefully enough. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the soft hiss of internal systems and the faint rhythm of her breathing, and then he felt it. Again, not heat this time, but something else. A subtle awareness that crept into his chest, his pulse quickening for no clear reason, his senses sharpening as if the air itself had changed. He turned slowly and found her watching him, really watching him, her eyes no longer sharp with defiance but searching, almost uncertain. "You feel it too," she said, not a question. Ethan frowned, taking a step back instinctively. "Feel what?" he asked, but even as he said it, he knew his heartbeat was louder, heavier, each thump echoing in his ears, his thoughts slightly slower, as if something was gently pressing against them, not forcing, not controlling, just present. "It is the phase," she explained, her voice steadying as she spoke, like explaining gave her something to hold on to. "Our bodies reach out, searching for a bond, for stability. Without it," she hesitated, her gaze dropping briefly before returning to him. "We lose ourselves." Ethan rubbed a hand across his face, the faint taste of metal lingering at the back of his tongue. And that bond, he said carefully. You think it has to be. He did not finish the sentence, but she understood. Of course she did, her expression tightening for just a moment before she stepped closer, slow, deliberate, each movement measured like she was fighting against something inside her. It is the only way my people know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, not seductive, not pleading, just honest in a way that made it heavier. It creates a signal that tells the hunters I am claimed, that I am no longer useful to them. Ethan swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. The logic was clear, simple, brutal, and wrong in a way that sat deep in his chest. She stopped just a few feet from him, close enough that he could feel the heat rolling off her, close enough that the strange pull in the air tightened, not overwhelming, but there, persistent. I do not want to disappear, she said, and for the first time since he found her, there was no defiance in her voice, no edge, just quiet truth. Ethan held her gaze, steady, grounding himself in something familiar, something human. Then you will not, he replied, his voice low but certain, and for a moment neither of them moved, the space between them charged with something neither fully understood, the hum outside returning, distant but closing again, reminding them that time was not on their side. And whatever choice came next, it would define far more than just survival. The air inside the shuttle felt tighter now, as if every inch of space was aware of them standing there. The distance between them measured not in feet, but in choices neither of them wanted to make. Ethan forced himself to move first, stepping past her to the control panel, fingers gripping the edge harder than necessary as he pulled up what little sensor data remained, static crawling across the display, but beneath it a pattern emerged, faint but consistent. They were circling, waiting for confirmation, waiting for her signal to spike again. They are not leaving, he said quietly, more observation than fear. Behind him, he heard her shift, the soft sound of fabric brushing against metal, her breathing still uneven but steadier than before, like she was holding something back by sheer will alone. They will not, she replied, her voice calmer now, but carrying a weight that settled deep in his chest. Not until they are certain. Ethan exhaled slowly, then turned to face her again. Really looked this time, not at the glow or the tremor in her hands, but at her expression, at the way she stood despite everything pressing down on her. Then we give them something else, he said, and she frowned slightly. Confusion cutting through the tension. Something else, she repeated, as if testing the words. Ethan nodded, stepping closer but stopping just short of that charged space between them. You said they track a signal, a bond, something that tells them you are claimed. Her eyes sharpened, not defensive this time but focused, curious despite herself. Yes, she said. It is biological, chemical, neural, all of it combined. Ethan gestured between them. Then what if it does not have to be what they expect? The silence that followed stretched, not empty but full of thought, of possibility neither of them had considered. Her gaze dropped briefly to his chest again, to where his heartbeat echoed steady and human, then back to his eyes. You think you can replicate it? She said slowly, not disbelief but caution. Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. I think your people are not the only ones who understand signals. He reached up, tapping the side of his neck where a small interface patch sat beneath his collar, standard issue for deep space techs, designed to sync with machines, to read patterns, to stabilize systems. This was built to communicate with things that do not speak human. He continued, voice steady. Maybe it can learn you too. Her breath caught slightly, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what he was suggesting. It has never been done, she said, almost to herself. Ethan shrugged lightly, though his eyes never left hers. Neither has half the stuff that keeps people alive out here. The faint hum above pulsed again, stronger, closer, a reminder that time was narrowing, that hesitation had a cost. She stepped forward again, slower this time, deliberate, until only a small space remained between them, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin without touching it. Her voice dropped, softer now, but clearer than anything she had said before. If you are wrong, she said, it will not just fail, it will expose us both. Ethan nodded once, accepting it without hesitation. Then I guess I better not be wrong. For a moment neither of them moved, the air thick with everything unspoken. Then she lifted her hand, hesitating only a fraction of a second before placing it lightly against his chest again, right over his heart. And this time he did not pull back, did not step away. Instead he reached up and activated the interface, a faint vibration spreading outward as the system came online, searching, adapting, trying to understand something it was never designed to read. Her eyes widened slightly as the glow beneath her skin reacted, shifting, stabilizing just a little, and for the first time since he found her, the tension in her shoulders eased, not gone, but less. Ethan, she said quietly, his name unfamiliar on her tongue, but steady. Whatever happens next, do not let go. And outside, the hum sharpened into something far more precise, as if the hunters had just noticed something new. The moment the interface activated fully, Ethan felt it, not like a shock or a jolt, but like stepping into a current that was already moving, a subtle pull behind his thoughts, a rhythm that was not his own brushing against his heartbeat and trying to match it. His breath hitched once before he steadied it, focusing, grounding himself in the familiar cadence of his own pulse, slow, controlled, human. And beneath his hand Lyra's glow shifted again, no longer erratic, no longer spiking in sharp bursts, but smoothing into something closer to a pattern, something that almost resembled harmony. Her fingers tightened slightly against his chest, as if anchoring herself. Her eyes locked onto his with a mix of surprise and something deeper, something fragile. "It is working," she whispered, the words barely audible, but heavy with disbelief. Ethan did not answer right away. His attention split between the sensation in his chest and the flickering data streaming across his interface, the system. Struggling, adapting, translating something entirely foreign into a language it could sustain. His vision blurred for a second as the connection deepened, not overwhelming but undeniable, like hearing a second heartbeat layered beneath his own. "Stay with me," he muttered, not sure if he meant her or himself. Outside the shuttle the hum sharpened again, but this time it hesitated, faltered, as if the signal they were expecting had changed in a way they could not immediately interpret. Lyra's breathing steadied further, the tension in her shoulders easing as the glow beneath her skin dimmed to a softer, steadier light. Not gone, but no longer out of control. "They cannot read it," she said slowly, her voice gaining strength with each word. "It does not match their pattern." Ethan let out a quiet breath, relief threading through the tension but not replacing it. Not yet, because the connection was still there, still active, and it was asking more from him with every passing second. He could feel it now, not just as a presence, but as an exchange, faint impressions slipping through, not thoughts exactly, not words, but sensations, fragments of emotion, heat, pressure, something like fear, but sharper, something like trust, but unfamiliar. He swallowed, steadying himself again. "You are pushing back," he said, realizing it as he spoke. Her control was not just returning, it was adapting, using the link, learning from it. Her gaze softened just slightly. "So are you," she replied, and there was something almost like wonder in her tone. The hum outside shifted once more, lower now, uncertain, as if the hunters were recalculating, searching for something they no longer fully understood. Ethan's grip tightened instinctively, not on her, but on the moment, on the fragile balance they had created. "How long can this hold?" he asked, not looking away from her. She hesitated, not out of weakness but out of honesty. "I do not know," she said. "This is not how it was meant to happen." Ethan gave a small nod, accepting that, accepting the unknown because there was no other option. The interface pulsed again, a soft vibration against his skin as it stabilized further, sinking deeper. And for a brief second the connection sharpened, clearer than before, and he felt it. Not as a concept, but as something real. Her fear of losing herself, her refusal to be reduced to something less than who she was, and beneath it all a quiet, stubborn hope that had not yet been extinguished. Ethan exhaled slowly, grounding himself again in his own identity, his own choices. "Then we make it hold," he said, his voice low but steady. And this time when she looked at him, there was no hesitation, no doubt, just a quiet certainty that mirrored his own. And outside, For the first time since he found her, the hum began to drift away, not gone, not completely, but no longer closing in, as if whatever was hunting them had just lost its target, and neither of them moved, neither of them spoke, because both of them understood that what they had just done was not supposed to be possible, and that was exactly why it might be enough. For a long second after the hum faded, neither of them moved, as if the silence itself might break if they did, and Ethan slowly became aware of how close they were, how the connection between them had not vanished with the danger but lingered, softer now, like an echo that refused to disappear. He exhaled and carefully lowered his hand, but the moment he did, the interface pulsed in protest, a faint warning flickering across his vision as the synchronization weakened. Lyra's breath caught. Again, not sharp like before, but enough to make him pause, her eyes narrowing slightly as she felt it too. "Do not," she said quietly, not commanding, not pleading, just certain. Ethan hesitated, then placed his hand back where it had been, steady over her heartbeat, and the connection settled again, smoother this time, more stable, like it had learned something from the first attempt. "So we are not done yet," he muttered, half to himself. Lyra shook her head faintly, strands of her hair catching the dim shuttle light as her glow remained controlled but present. "No," she replied. "We have only changed the signal, not ended it." Ethan let out a slow breath, glancing toward the cockpit where the instruments still flickered with unreliable data. "Then we cannot stay here," he said. "If they realize what happened, they will adjust." She studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "The agreement immediate and unspoken." "Where will you go?" she asked, and there was something different in her tone now, not distant, not guarded, but genuinely curious, as if the answer mattered beyond survival. Ethan shifted slightly, testing the balance between movement and maintaining the connection. "There is a relay station about 80 miles west," he said, visualizing the map from memory. "It is old, mostly abandoned, but it still has shielding, enough to hide from scans if we are careful." Lyra's gaze sharpened again, calculating, adapting. "And you trust it?" she asked. Ethan gave a faint, almost amused breath. "Out here, trust is a flexible concept," he replied. "But it is better than waiting for them to figure us out." She considered that, then nodded once more, her grip on his arm shifting slightly, not holding him back, but anchoring herself to the shared rhythm between them. Ethan moved toward the pilot's seat, guiding her with him, their steps slow and deliberate, every movement adjusted to keep the connection intact. The shuttle groaned as he powered the engines higher, the vibration running through the floor and up into their legs, the air thick with heat and anticipation. Outside, the sand lifted in spirals as the thrusters pushed against the ground, and for a moment Ethan wondered if the sudden spike in energy would draw attention. But the interface remained stable, the signal still masked, still unreadable. "Hold steady," he said, more out of instinct than necessity. Lyra's voice followed, softer now but grounded. "I am." The shuttle lifted unevenly, struggling against damaged stabilizers but managing to rise, the desert falling away beneath them in a blur of crimson and gold. Ethan's hands tightened on the controls, guiding the ship westward, every system protesting but obeying. And beside him Lyra remained close, not because she had to, but because the connection between them demanded it. And as the planet stretched out below, vast and indifferent, Ethan realized something he had not expected. This was no longer just about getting her out, no longer just about avoiding what hunted them. This was about holding onto something fragile that should not exist, something that had already begun to change both of them. And as the horizon shifted and the distant outline of broken structures appeared against the fading light, he knew the next part would not be easier, only different. And somehow, that felt even more dangerous. The shuttle rattled as it pushed through a layer of unstable atmosphere, the hull creaking in protest while warning lights flickered in uneven patterns across the control panel. Ethan kept one hand steady on the controls and the other anchored against his chest, where Lyra's hand still rested, the connection between them no longer sharp or overwhelming but constant, like a second presence woven into his awareness. He could feel her now without looking, the subtle shifts in her breathing, the way her focus tightened whenever the engine strained, and beneath it all a quiet thread of emotion that was not entirely his own, not intrusive, not controlling, just there, existing alongside him. "You are adjusting faster than expected," Lyra said softly, her voice cutting through the low hum of the engines. Ethan let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if the situation were different. "I have had practice adapting to bad situations," he replied, eyes scanning the horizon as the relay station grew clearer in the distance, its skeletal structure rising out of the desert like the remains of something that had once mattered. "This one is just more personal." Lyra did not respond immediately, but he felt the shift in her attention. The way her focus turned inward for a moment, as if considering his words from more than one perspective, the connection pulsed gently, almost in agreement, then steadied again. "It is not supposed to work this way," she said after a moment, not questioning, just stating a fact that still did not sit right with her. Ethan adjusted their descent slightly, guiding the shuttle toward a relatively intact landing platform. "Most systems are built with assumptions," he said. "Sometimes those assumptions are wrong." The ground rushed up slowly, the thrusters kicking up spirals of sand as the shuttle settled with a heavy thud, the engines powering down into a low idle. And for a moment the only sound was the soft ticking of overheated metal cooling under pressure. Ethan exhaled and leaned back slightly, tension easing just enough to remind him how much he had been holding. "We made it," he said quietly, more to confirm it than celebrate it. Lyra shifted beside him, her hand still resting against his chest, not out of necessity now, but something closer to choice. "For now," she replied, and there was no fear in her voice, only awareness. Ethan nodded once, reaching for the control to open the hatch. But before he pressed it, he paused, something in the connection tightening slightly, a faint ripple of unease that did not come from him. He turned his head toward her, meeting her gaze. "You feel that?" he said. And it was not a question. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, her posture straightening as her attention sharpened outward. "Yes," she answered, her voice low, controlled. "They are not gone." Ethan's hand hovered over the hatch control, the silence stretching just long enough to confirm what both of them already knew. The signal might be masked, the connection might be stable, but whatever had been hunting her had not given up. It had only lost sight for a moment, and moments like that did not last forever. Ethan let out a slow breath and finally pressed the control, the hatch, lowering with a mechanical hiss as the outside air rushed in, cooler now as the suns dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the broken structures of the relay station. "Then we do not give them time to catch up," he said, standing carefully, mindful of the connection as he moved. Lyra followed without hesitation, their movements still linked, still adjusted to each other in ways that felt increasingly natural. As they stepped out onto the worn metal platform, the wind carried a different sound this time, not the distant hum from before, but something quieter, more precise, like a system recalibrating, and Ethan's instincts tightened immediately, because whatever was coming next was not going to be the same as before, it was going to be smarter. The wind that greeted them outside was colder than before, slipping through the gaps in Ethan's suit, and carrying a faint metallic scent that did not belong to the desert. The relay station loomed ahead in fractured silence, its tall antenna arrays twisted slightly off alignment like they had been left too long without purpose. Ethan stepped forward carefully, boots echoing against the worn platform while his free hand reached instinctively for the compact tool at his belt, not as a weapon but as something familiar, something grounding. Beside him Lyra moved in sync without needing guidance, her hand still resting against his chest, the connection between them steady but subtly shifting, adapting to the new environment. And he could feel it now more clearly than before, the way her awareness stretched outward, brushing against the structure around them like a second set of senses. "This place remembers signals," she said quietly, her voice carrying a strange certainty. Ethan glanced toward the towering relay spire, its surface etched with old circuitry that flickered faintly, as if responding to their presence. "Good," he replied. "Then maybe we can make it forget one." They crossed into the main access corridor, the interior air cooler, still, filled with the faint hum of dormant systems that had not fully shut down. The walls reflected dim light in fractured patterns, and each step seemed to echo longer than it should, as if the station itself was listening. Ethan moved toward a central console, Brushing away a thin layer of dust as he powered it up, the screen flickered, then stabilized into a grid of outdated but functional controls. Come on, he muttered, fingers moving quickly as he accessed the shielding protocols. Just give me something usable. Behind him, Lyra's breathing shifted again, not unstable, but focused, her attention no longer on him alone but on the space around them. They are closer, she said, her voice low, controlled. Ethan did not look back, but he felt the ripple through their connection, sharper now, more defined, like a warning carried through both of them at once. How close? He asked, his hands still moving across the console, rerouting power, forcing systems online that had not been active in years. Close enough to notice this place, she answered, and that was enough. Ethan slammed his hand against the final control, and the station responded with a deep, resonant hum as shielding arrays powered up, a faint shimmer forming across the structure, subtle but effective, bending signals, distorting patterns, making them something harder to track. The hum outside shifted. Immediately, not louder, not closer, but confused, searching without direction. Ethan exhaled slowly, tension easing just slightly as the system held. That buys us time, he said, stepping back from the console, finally turning to face her fully again. Lyra stood a few feet away now, her hand no longer pressed against his chest, but hovering just inches away, as if testing the distance. The connection between them still present, still steady, but no longer dependent on constant contact. Her glow remained soft, controlled, her breathing even, and for the first time since he had found her, she looked centered, not just surviving, but present. It is stabilizing, she said, her voice quieter now, but stronger. Ethan nodded, studying her carefully. You are stabilizing, he corrected, and something in her expression shifted, not defiance, not uncertainty, but recognition. As if she was seeing herself differently through his words, the silence between them stretched again, but this time it was not heavy, not tense, just quiet, until the connection pulsed once more, sharper than before, carrying something new, something neither of them expected, not fear, not urgency, but awareness, focused and deliberate. Lyra's eyes lifted slightly, her gaze turning toward the far end of the station where the shadows seemed just a little too still. They have adapted, she said, and this time there was no doubt in her voice. Ethan followed her gaze, his instincts tightening as the faint hum returned, not circling, not searching, but directed, precise, and he understood immediately. Whatever had been hunting them was no longer guessing, it was learning. The hum did not rush this time. It arrived with intention, a low, precise vibration that threaded through the walls of the relay station and settled into Ethan's bones like something that already knew where to look. He did not move at first, did not reach for anything, because instinct told him this was not something he could outrun the way he had before. Beside him, Lyra's posture shifted, her shoulders straightening, her focus sharpening into something almost regal, and through the connection, he felt it clearly, not fear, not panic, but recognition, the kind that came from understanding exactly what was coming next. They have found a pattern, she said quietly, her eyes still fixed on the shadowed corridor ahead. Ethan let out a slow breath, his mind already turning, already searching for angles that did not exist. Then we change it again, he replied. But even as he said it, he knew it would not be that simple. The station's shielding still hummed around them, bending signals, distorting presence. But the hum outside was no longer confused. It was aligning, adjusting in real time, learning from every second they remained here. Lyra stepped forward slightly, not toward the threat but toward him, closing the small distance between them without hesitation, her hand rising once more to rest against his chest, not out of necessity now but choice. And the connection responded instantly, deepening, stabilizing, but also revealing more than before. Ethan inhaled sharply as a clearer wave passed between them. Not just emotion this time, but memory fragments, flashes of cold chambers filled with light, of voices that measured worth in utility, of silence where identity should have been, and beneath it all a quiet, unbroken resistance that refused to yield. He steadied himself, grounding in his own thoughts before they could blur. You are not losing yourself, he said firmly. Not as reassurance, but as fact. Lyra's gaze shifted to him then, and for a moment the outside threat faded, replaced by something far more immediate, something human. Not anymore, she replied, and there was strength in it now, not borrowed, not fragile, but hers. The hum sharpened again, closer now, no longer distant, and the lights in the corridor flickered in response, as if the station itself could feel the intrusion. Ethan glanced toward the console, then back at her, calculating, measuring the limits of what they had already done. They are tracking the connection, he said, the realization settling heavy but clear. Lyra did not deny it, her expression tightening just slightly. Yes, she said. They cannot read it fully, but they can follow it. Ethan nodded once, accepting it without hesitation. Then his gaze steadied, something shifting behind his eyes as a new idea formed. Risky, untested, but the only option left. Then we stop hiding it, he said. Lyra blinked once, the words catching her off guard for the first time since he had met her. What? She asked, not in disbelief but in careful attention. Ethan stepped closer, eliminating the last inches between them, his hand rising to rest lightly over hers, reinforcing the connection instead of minimizing it. We make it louder, he continued, voice low but certain, not as a signal they expect, but as something they cannot process fast enough. The hum outside reacted immediately, not retreating, not advancing, but shifting again, uncertain for the briefest moment. Lyra studied him, searching his expression, and through the connection he felt her understanding unfold, not instantly, but piece by piece. You want them to follow it, she said slowly. Ethan gave a small nod. Away from here, he confirmed. Away from anything that makes sense. The silence that followed was sharp, balanced on the edge of decision, the kind that changed outcomes permanently. Lyra's grip tightened slightly, not out of fear, but resolve. Then we do it together, she said. And this time there was no hesitation, no doubt, just alignment. The connection between them pulsed stronger, brighter, no longer hiding, no longer blending in, but becoming something entirely new. Something neither system nor instinct had accounted for. And outside, the hum responded, locking onto them with renewed precision, but also with something else beneath it now. Something that felt almost like confusion, as if for the first time, the hunters were no longer entirely certain what they were chasing. The moment they stopped hiding, the station itself seemed to react, the low hum of its shielding shifting into a deeper resonance, as if it was struggling to interpret the sudden surge in signal that no longer followed any known pattern. Ethan felt it immediately, the connection between him and Lyra no longer subtle or contained but expanding, stretching outward like a pulse that carried fragments of both of them into the surrounding systems. His breath steadied out of sheer, well as unfamiliar. Sensations brushed against his awareness, not overwhelming but constant, like standing in a current that refused to let go. Keep it steady, he said quietly, more to anchor himself than to guide her. Lyra did not answer with words, but he felt her response through the connection, a deliberate alignment, her presence no longer defensive but open, controlled, and strong. The glow beneath her skin intensified slightly, not erratic, not unstable, but purposeful, as if she was choosing how to be. Seen for the first time in her life, outside the hum sharpened, locking onto them with precise intent. But beneath that precision there was hesitation. The signal they projected did not resolve into anything the hunters could categorize. It was not the expected bond, not the biological marker they had designed their systems to track. It was something layered, something contradictory, and that hesitation bought them seconds, maybe minutes. Ethan stepped toward the console again, his movements slower now, deliberate, every action measured against the pull of the connection that demanded his attention. He rerouted additional power into the station's outer transmitters, pushing the signal outward beyond the structure, amplifying it in controlled bursts, not enough to reveal their exact position, but enough to create multiple false trails, each one carrying a fragment of what they had become. If they want a signal, he muttered, fingers moving across aging controls. We give them too many. Lyra moved closer behind him, her presence steady, her hand never leaving its place against his chest, and through the connection he felt her understanding deepen, her awareness extending into the system, as if she could sense how the signals branched, overlapped, diverged. They are following all of them, she said softly, and there was a note of quiet astonishment in her voice. Ethan allowed himself a small breath of relief. Not victory. Not yet. But momentum. Good, he replied. Then they are not following us. The station lights flickered again as the strain increased, the old systems pushing beyond their intended limits. But holding, for now, outside the hum fractured, splitting into multiple directions as the hunters adjusted, recalculated, and pursued the conflicting signals. And for the first time since this began, the pressure that had been building around them eased, not gone, but dispersed. Lyra's breathing slowed further, her posture relaxing just slightly as the immediate threat loosened its grip. And through the connection, Ethan felt something new rise beneath the tension, something quieter, deeper, a sense of clarity that had not been there before. She was not just surviving the phase anymore. She was understanding it, shaping it, and that realization settled heavily in his chest. You are not reacting anymore, he said, turning his head just enough to meet her gaze. You are controlling it. Lyra held his eyes for a long moment, the faint glow reflecting in her irises, no longer uncertain, no longer fractured. No, she said softly, but there was no denial in it, only correction. We are. The word lingered between them, simple, undeniable, and outside the fractured hum began to drift further apart, chasing echoes that no longer led back to the source. Ethan leaned back slightly, tension easing from his shoulders for the first time in what felt like hours, but he did not break the connection, did not step away, because he knew now that it was not just a tool, not just a solution. It was something that had changed the equation entirely, something neither of them could fully define yet. And as the station settled into a strained but stable rhythm, the silence that followed was no longer filled with fear, but with the weight of what they had just done, and the understanding that whatever came next, they would not face it the same way they had before. For a while, the station held its breath with them, the fractured signals stretching outward into the empty desert as the distant hum scattered into thinner, less certain threads, and Ethan allowed himself a moment to feel it. Not relief exactly, but space, the kind that only came after pressure had finally loosened its grip. His shoulders dropped slightly as he leaned against the console, eyes half closing as he focused on the steady rhythm in his chest, not just his own heartbeat anymore, but the quiet echo of Lyra's presence still intertwined with it, softer now, less urgent, but undeniably there. They are pulling back, Lyra said, her voice calm, measured, and for the first time since he had met her, completely free of strain. Ethan opened his eyes and turned toward her, studying the change, the glow beneath her skin now faint, almost like a memory of what it had been, her breathing even, her posture relaxed but not fragile. She looked whole, not because the phase had passed, but because it no longer controlled her. You are stable, he said, not as a question but as confirmation. Lyra met his gaze, and there was something new in her eyes, something clear and grounded that had not been there before. Yes, she replied simply. Then after a brief pause, because I am not alone in it anymore. The words settled between them, quiet but heavy with meaning. Ethan nodded once, understanding more than he could explain, because the connection still lingered, not demanding, not pulling, but present like a shared memory neither of them could step away from. He straightened slightly, pushing off the console as his attention returned to the systems around them. We cannot keep the station running like this for long, he said, glancing at the flickering power readouts. It will burn out eventually. Lyra followed his gaze, her expression thoughtful, not worried but aware. Then we leave before it does, she said, as if the solution was simple. Ethan allowed a faint smile at that, small but real. That was the plan anyway, he replied, but as he turned back toward her, the connection pulsed again, not with urgency this time, but with something quieter, something almost like hesitation. He paused, his expression shifting slightly as he tried to place it, and then he realized it was not coming from him. What is it? He asked softly. Lyra did not answer immediately, her gaze drifting for just a moment, not outward, but inward, as if she was listening to something only she could hear. Then she looked back at him, and for the first time, there was uncertainty, not fear, not weakness, just something unguarded. When this ends, she said slowly, choosing each word carefully. This connection, it will fade. Ethan felt the weight of that before he could respond, because he knew she was right. The interface, the phase, the circumstances that had forced them together, all of it was temporary. All of it would eventually resolve, and what remained after that was unknown. He exhaled quietly, his gaze steady as it met hers. Maybe, he said, not dismissing it, but not accepting it as certain either. Lyra studied him for a long moment, as if trying to understand how someone could hold uncertainty without letting it define them. And through the connection he felt it again, that quiet thread of curiosity that had been there from the beginning, now stronger, clearer, no longer overshadowed by survival. "You're kind," she said softly. "You do not follow instinct the same way." Ethan gave a small shrug, the motion simple but honest. "We follow it," he replied. "We just do not let it decide everything." Lyra's expression shifted at that, something like understanding settling into place, not complete, but growing, and outside the station, the last remnants of the distant hum faded further into the horizon, no longer searching, no longer adapting, just gone for now. The silence that followed was different from before, not tense, not waiting, but open, and as Ethan looked at her, really looked without the weight of immediate danger pressing in, he realized that whatever came next would not be about escape or survival alone. It would be about choice, and for the first time, both of them actually had one. The station had grown quiet in a way that felt almost unfamiliar, the low hum of strained systems settling into a steady rhythm, as if the structure itself had accepted their presence, and Ethan found himself standing still for longer than necessary. His hand no longer pressed over Lyra's, but still close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating between them. The connection had softened again, no longer pulsing with urgency or demand, but it had not disappeared. It lingered like a trace that refused to fade completely, subtle, steady, real. Lyra stepped away first, not abruptly, not to break the moment, but with a quiet certainty that carried no fear, her posture upright, her breathing even, and when the distance between them widened, Ethan felt it, the connection thinning slightly, not breaking, but changing, like a thread stretched longer instead of cut. He watched her as she moved toward the open corridor, the fading light from the outside world casting soft reflections across her skin, the glow beneath it now almost gone, leaving only the natural tone of her presence behind. "It is quieter now," she said, her voice calm, but there was something thoughtful beneath it, something that had not been there before. Ethan nodded, stepping closer again, not to close the gap completely, but enough to remain within that shared awareness. "That is what it feels like when something stops trying to control you," he replied. Lyra turned to look at him, and for a moment her expression softened in a way that felt more human than alien. "Then I have never known quiet before," she said, and the words did not carry sadness, only truth. Ethan let that settle without trying to fix it, without offering anything more than presence, because he understood that some realizations did not need to be answered. They just needed to exist. The distant horizon beyond the station shifted slightly as the last light of the suns dipped lower, the sky deepening into darker shades that stretched endlessly, and Ethan glanced toward the shuttle, its outline still visible on the landing platform, waiting, functional, a way forward. "We should leave before the systems here fail completely," he said after a moment, practical as always, but not dismissing what had just passed between them. Lyra followed his gaze, then looked back at him, and this time there was no hesitation in her expression, no uncertainty, just a quiet decision that had already been made. "Where you go," she said slowly, "is not where I am expected to be." Ethan gave a faint, almost amused exhale. "That seems to be a pattern," he replied, then added more seriously, "You do not have to follow me." Lyra held his gaze steadily, and through the connection he felt it again, not as a pull, not as a need, but as something chosen, something deliberate. "I know," she said, and that was all. No explanation, no justification, just certainty. Ethan nodded once, accepting it for what it was, not questioning it, not trying to define it, because whatever this was between them, it had already proven that it did not fit into simple categories. The connection pulsed one more time, softer than before, almost like a closing echo, and Ethan became aware that the interface at his neck had gone still, the system no longer actively sustaining what had formed, and yet the awareness remained, faint but undeniable, as if something deeper had taken its place. It did not fade, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Lyra stepped closer again, not to restore the connection, but to stand beside him, her presence steady, grounded, real. No, she replied, her voice just as quiet. It changed, and for the first time since this had begun, there was no urgency left in the moment, no pressure, no demand. Just two beings standing in the quiet after something impossible had already happened. And as Ethan turned toward the shuttle, knowing the next step would take them away from everything that had led to this point, he did not feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was carrying it with him, and that made all the difference. The shuttle engines came alive with a low, steady vibration that filled the quiet space between them, not loud, not urgent, just constant, like a heartbeat that no longer needed to prove it was there. Ethan guided the vessel off the fractured platform as the relay station fell away beneath them, its dim lights flickering one last time before fading into the vast stretch of desert. And for a moment neither of them spoke, the silence not empty but complete, as if words would only lessen what had already settled into place. The sky above shifted into deep indigo, the last trace of sunlight dissolving into distant horizons, and the stars began to emerge one by one, cold and endless. Lyra stood beside him, not touching, not needing to, her presence steady in a way that felt different from before, not bound by necessity, not driven by survival, but chosen. And Ethan realized that the connection between them had not disappeared. It had simply become quieter, woven into something less visible but more real, like a memory that did not fade with time. "Where do you go now?" she asked after a while, her voice soft but clear. Ethan adjusted their course slightly, the navigation system recalibrating with a faint flicker as he plotted a path away from everything that had tried to define them. "Somewhere that does not ask too many questions," he replied, and there was a hint of something lighter in his tone now. Not quite humor, but close enough to feel like it. Lyra considered that, her gaze drifting toward the stars as if seeing them differently for the first time. "Then I will learn to answer none," she said, and the simplicity of it carried more weight than any explanation could have. Ethan glanced at her briefly, then back to the endless stretch ahead, and for the first time since this began, he was not calculating risk, not scanning for threats, just moving forward, the way he always had, but not alone anymore. The connection pulsed faintly once more, not demanding, not guiding, just there, a quiet acknowledgement of something that had changed both of them in ways neither fully understood yet. Lyra's eyes shifted back to him, studying him not as a stranger, not as a means to survive, but as something else. Entirely, something undefined but certain. "You chose differently," she said softly, and there was no question in it, only observation. Ethan let out a slow breath, his hands steady on the controls. "No," he replied after a moment, his voice calm, grounded. "I just chose what felt right." Lyra's expression softened at that, not into a smile, not into anything easily named, but into something quieter, something that held meaning without needing to show it. The stars stretched out ahead of them, silent witnesses to a moment that would never be recorded, never be understood by those who had tried to control it. And as the shuttle moved deeper into that endless dark, Ethan realized that nothing about what had happened fit into the rules he had spent his life working around. And yet it made more sense than anything else he had ever known. He did not rescue her the way stories usually told it. He did not claim her, did not change her fate through force or instinct. He simply stood there, made a choice, and refused to let something be taken that should have never been taken in the first place. And that had been enough, more than enough. Lyra turned her gaze back to the stars, her voice barely above a whisper as the silence settled fully around them. "Your kind does not conquer the unknown," she said, and Ethan did not respond right away, because he knew she was still finishing the thought, still finding the words. "You remind it what it means to feel," she continued, and this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just quiet truth. Ethan exhaled slowly, his eyes fixed on the endless stretch ahead, the path unwritten, the future undefined, and he did not try to correct her. Did not try to explain it away, because for once, there was nothing that needed to be added. The engines hummed steadily, the stars burned quietly, and the space between them held something that did not need a name, because it already existed, and that was enough.